Hey, David Brewster here, new episode of 3 for All. This is 3 G.E. Smith licks from 1985 to 1995, and I've had some requests to feature this legendary guitarist, which made me really happy because I love G.E. Smith. I've been a fan and kind of following him ever since I was a kid, just starting to learn how to play guitar, and I would glue myself to the television, holding my guitar. I would watch late night talk shows, like Letterman and Conan O'Brien and Arsenio Hall and shows like that, and watch the band and watch the musical guests. But I religiously, every Saturday night, I was watching Saturday Night Live. I'd check out the band, like the guest, but then I would also obviously check out the Saturday Night Live band, G.E. Smith, T-Bone on bass, just rocking out. And, like those little segments between, skits, or like when they go to a commercial and the band was playing, I would always just watch it and grab my guitar and try to figure out a lick or two. I started recording some of that stuff, on VHS tapes. And definitely a huge fan. And that was a big influence on me. I was just starting to learn how to play guitar, and every weekend I was watching G.E. Smith rock out. A total guitar legend. So most people on the street associate G.E. Smith directly with Saturday Night Live. I mean, he was the band leader for 10 years. But then also, he's worked with Hall & Oates and Mick Jagger and Bob Dylan. And there's a whole bunch of people. His legacy goes back a long way. I actually tracked down his first solo album right there on the wall. I couldn't believe I found that. It was like $4 or $5. But definitely, even though, most people associate him with SNL, G.E. Smith has definitely been very active, very busy, behind the scenes, on tours, as a band leader. He's done a lot of stuff. But here's an image with some of the people he's worked and recorded with in his career. I remember watching Saturday Night Live. Valerie Bertinelli was the guest host, and Eddie Van Halen, was in that episode. That's very famous. All the Van Halen maniacs know Van Halen was on SNL and played with G.E. Smith and the Saturday Night Live band. And honestly, I've seen that episode of Saturday Night Live more than any other. I've watched and rewatched that same episode, that same jam. I think I had it recorded, like on a VHS tape. I used to watch that over and over and over. I watched it in college. I've watched it online. There's just some magic in the air with Eddie playing with G.E. Smith and that SNL band. It's dynamite. So the licks in this episode actually came from me compiling and kind of editing band shots from SNL. And the band shots were those little moments, before or after a commercial when G.E. Smith and the band was jamming. Usually like blues standards, early blues rock. There was like Freddie King and some stuff lying around in there. Great stuff. And I always loved those moments because G.E. was, changing guitars. One minute he'd have a Telly. The next minute he'd have a Les Paul or a Flying V or a Firebird or something where it's like, man, check out all those cool guitars. And of course the licks and the music and stuff was great too. But that's where I grabbed, some of these licks and ideas I'm going to share in this episode. So if you're a G.E. Smith fan, a Saturday Night Live fan, a blues rock, rock and roll fan, this episode's totally for you. The first two licks actually came from the same band shot, and I really just split it in half. I'm going to share the first half obviously first, the second half next, and then we're going to put those two halves together. And for this one, the band's basically banging on G or G7 twice, and then G.E. sprinkling these bluesy licks, between the hits. Something like this. One more time. So for this first one, he's basically starting on the open G and walks up B flat to C right there. And then you're going to do kind of a quick bend and release on that C note back to that B flat and then pull off to the open G. Like that. Then go back to that B flat and kind of smear bend it just a little bit, grab G, and then end on that B flat. Like that. So it all kind of flows together. So that's technically one lick, and I'm kind of adding two licks for this first one because there's lick one. A couple hits, and then you're going to move up basically into the Albert King box right here. Like that. And then there's 2 more hits, right? Just like this. You know, something like that. The timing was off a little bit there, but that's basically like the first part of this first band shot idea. So the next lick is the second half of that band shot, and just keep in mind we previously had 2 hits, you know, with that, the ending of the first part, and then G starts doing this. One more time. You know, something like that. So that first lick after the hits, like that, real simple. And then 2 hits, and then you can race down G minor pentatonic. Like that. And then there's 2 hits right there. So, and then, and then it's something like this when you put it all together. You know, one more time. Something like that. Really cool and really typical of those little band shots that you would hear on SNL, you know, with G.E. Smith and Tom T-Bone Wolk on bass too. Okay, once again, the next 2 licks are from the same band shot. I've split it in half. I'm going to share the first half obviously first, the second half next, and we're going to put them together, you know, once again. And this is in the key of E now. Different song, different groove. And G.E.'s playing a flying V in this clip, which is really cool. And the first half of this lick's like this. One more time. Like that. So we're sliding into this B note, grabbing that D, back to that B, and then a D to E hammer on, and then grab that lower E right there. So we're kind of setting up like that E octave with a lick. Like that. And then that D to E hammer on with some vibrato on that E. And then this G to E. So that G to E, G back to that A, and then you're going to bend that A to B. And then you're going to bend and release it without picking again, like 3 times. Like that. And then that G, A, G at the end. Like that. Now the next half, right? The end of that lick is technically the beginning of the next, you know, part right there. So make sure you've got that under your belt. And then get ready for the next lick right here. All right, now the next lick is the second half of this band shot, right? And the first half was this. We already ran through this. Right? Now off that G, you're going to move back to F sharp for the second half of this lick, and you're going to do a hammer-on pull-off, that F sharp, you know, G to F sharp. So that hammer-on pull-off and index finger bend on that F sharp up a half step. You know, grab this E. So you're doing that index finger bend and going back to that E note right there. Like that. So then after you get to that E note right there, you're going to grab this D note, then do a hammer on into that E note. And then you basically start doing the shift slide there, that E to F sharp. And that F sharp to G, that G to A right there. When you get to that A note, you're going to bend that up a whole step to B, reach over and grab this high E, and then grab this D and bend that to E for the end, right? You know, something like that. One more time. So if you put the first and the second halves together, you've got this. One more time. Really tasteful phrases and melodic. You know, definitely G.E. Smith is always like super melodic and definitely always plays for the song, plays for the moment. He never plays for himself or whatever. It's always in the pocket, in the groove, like the right note at the right time. You know, I mean, trademark, just essential guitar skills right there from Mr. G.E. Smith. Okay, here's a bonus lick, and I've already shared 4 licks, technically. You know, 2 different band shots that were split in half, so that's technically 4 different licks that I kind of served up here. So here's a 5th lick. This is 3 for all. Normally I do include 3 licks and a bonus lick. Here's a 5th lick. And this actually came from the late great Tom T-Bone Wolk, you know, the bass player from Saturday Night Live. Most people remember him with the hat. He definitely had a very animated kind of presence, you know, moving his arms and stuff around. And he also worked with G.E. Smith with Hall & Oates and a bunch of other, you know, things. They worked together a lot. And there was a chemistry between them. You could tell that they liked working and playing together. And this clip just made me happy because they're both playing guitar. T-Bone's the one playing lead. G.E.'s playing rhythm. G.E. is just smiling. You can tell he looks really happy. So this is played over a blues in G like this. That's basically what G.E. Smith is playing. And then T-Bone whips out this really authentic blues phrasing like this. One more time. So it's a blues in G, and you hear T-Bone targeting, you know, this G note like that. So that D to E, target that G note and then back to that E note. And then he grabs this A note and bends that to B. And then you hear him without picking again, he releases the bend and then there's a muted like pluck right there. And then, so right before like those 3 bends right there. And it kind of adds like this honky tonk kind of country sound. So after that little like muted pick right there, then you're gonna bend that, you know, A to B 3 times. And then there's a chromatic move right there, that C, C sharp to D on the high E. And then, you know, kind of a quick bend on that A and end on that G with vibrato and pick it 3 times. So one more time real slow. Something like that. I just grabbed that because I really liked just the way you could tell they were like on cloud 9. They were both smiling and really into it. And it was cool just seeing T-Bone, you know, playing guitar, playing it on a Telecaster. That was so cool. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode 3 for all. This look at 3 G.E. Smith licks from 1985 to 1995. And I gave it that span of years because I wasn't really sure where these clips came from, like what year it was or what episode it was. I just grabbed them because I found them here on YouTube. But it definitely, I had a blast putting this together, going back and thinking about when I was a kid, watching Saturday Night Live, watching G.E. Smith, watching Eddie Van Halen, and a whole bunch of other people on that show. And it inspired me. It influenced me. You know, every weekend I was grabbing my guitar because I saw all this cool music and stuff on television. and it was usually Saturday Night Live or Letterman or something like that. And it just really inspired me. And it was cool to kind of go back down memory lane, like, oh yeah, I remember doing this like every weekend religiously. I would record those shows and rewatch them, and I was just obsessed. So G.E. Smith was a huge influence on me, and I realized that, but I didn't really realize it until I put this episode together and really thought about it. Like, wow, I spent a lot of time with Mr. Smith and his, guitar collection or whatever on the weekends. Definitely essential. And nostalgia too. It's like, yeah, I love thinking about stuff I did when I was a teenager. And that's what I did when I was a teenager, was watch SNL with G.E. Smith. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons. I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.